Welcome to the Prosthetics and Orthotics podcast with Brent Wright and Joris Peels. Hello, everyone. This is another episode of the Orthotics and Prosthetics podcast, and I'm joined by Brent Wright. How are you doing, Brent?
Hey, Joris. It's good to be on with you again, and I'm super excited about this podcast.
Okay. So why are you so excited about this podcast? Who's going to join us?
Hey, well, we've got Paul Sugg, who's the president of Eastpoint Prosthetics and Orthotics, that's going to be joining us. And one of the things that's neat about Paul is he wears kind of a couple different hats. And so he's been in the past, essentially, and in some of the original digital and carving and that sort of thing in the prosthetic and orthotic realm. But then he's also kind of lifted the curtain on the future and is living the future by 3D printing new devices, new materials. And so it's going to be interesting to talk about kind of that progression, but then also you can talk about some of the business sense behind some of the decisions that he's making.
Okay. That sounds very interesting. So welcome to the show, Paul.
Awesome, man. Joris, good to have the opportunity to be with you guys.
Yeah, definitely. So how long have you been working in this field? When did you get started?
Yeah, January of 1993, man. 29 years I've been doing this, so it feels like a lifetime sometimes, you know?
Yeah. And do you still like it? Are you still very passionate for what you do after 29 years?
Yeah, absolutely. Helping people is what I love doing. That's originally why I got into the field. And so being able to help people, even if it's now on a more business side, helping employees, reach their potential and things like that. I'm not in as much patient care as I was, obviously, when I initially started, but still being able to help people and still doing missions work and stuff like that around the world. So it's awesome. I still love it.
Okay, that sounds really interesting. I mean, I said the other day, like when we're talking to Brent, I said it seems like it's very concrete. You're literally you make something that works or it doesn't. It's a very hard pass or fail if you don't do this correctly.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think another thing too is, we oftentimes in prosthetics and orthotics are taking care of people. We put a leg on somebody, they stand up and walk for the first time, and there's all this ooh and ah, and it's like that's what we do every day. So we don't get I don't want to say the excitement. I still get just as excited watching a person walk for the first time, but it's like a life-changing event for some of these folks. And I guess we don't take it nearly to heart like that as they do when they're living it.
Yeah, definitely. And so over the time of your career, what have been some of the things, just generally, we're not necessarily talking about the digitization thing here, which of course, the main thrust of our podcast is, to talk about 3D printing, 3D scanning, and digitization of orthotics and prosthetics. But just in a bigger picture over the past 29 years, what has changed in your business?
Yeah, I mean, well, besides like what you were just saying, besides the digitization process, I mean, we've done things central fabrication wise. We've done things in-house fabrication. So materials have changed even in prosthetics and orthotics. Forget 3D printing for a minute. There's just not been a lot of changes. What I've seen that's been such a huge effect to me about 3D printing is it's changing so rapidly now. It was 10 years, you might see one new product or something like that. I mean, all of these companies like to say that they're putting a new foot or a new knee or a new component out every year, and they are. But as far as big game changers, you don't see those happen except every, 10, 15 years in this industry. But now with the 3D printing coming involved and new materials and different materials, man, that's changing a lot more rapidly.
Okay. And is that and why is that important? I mean, is it important because the fit is better, because it's faster, or what's the driver for 3D printing?
Well, I think the marrying of different fields now. is something that for a long time in orthotics and prosthetics, we kind of held everything close to our chest. I don't want you to see what I'm doing. Raising the water level for everyone was not something that we were interested in. These are my patients. I don't want you to see them, things like that. But now, with the marrying of different industries into the prosthetics and orthotics field, we're able to take like aerospace and start interjecting more of that in O&P, or medical devices from other places, and interject that into what we're doing. And then you have your CAD CAM guys, so you got engineers that are helping us to develop things like that. I mean, we're engineers in our own right for doing prosthetics and orthotics, but to be able to see those different career fields, if you will, kind of cross and intermingle has just made a huge difference for us.
Okay. And are you like super optimistic about like, are all prosthetics going to be 3D printed, or what's your view on how it's going to develop?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest thing there is, I hate to say this because I feel like I'm an old timer to a certain extent. We get enough old timers die out. Yeah, it'll change, but the sad thing about it is we've got to get past the stigmatism that's there, that the only way I can do this is touch it with my hands. And there's an artsy thing to it. I mean, kind of like if you looked at Michelangelo and you said, hey, I'm not going to let you use your paintbrushes anymore. I'm not going to let you use your sculpting tools or whatever. How does he create a masterpiece then? And I think that that's a part of what we're having to get across to not just old timers. I mean, because a lot of people that are graduating now, I mean, the schools that, like Brent and I went to school at still teach traditional methods as well. And so you come out of school and you've learned how to do this the traditional way. Your foundation blocks are there, and you have to learn digitization if you want to change with the environment.
And how are you guys how are you guys getting to grips with the technology at Eastpoint? What are you doing to get it on board and to make it work?
Yeah, I think one of the things there is, being open. Again, Brent has been very instrumental in obviously pushing the envelope for us. Sometimes I want to pull his reins a little bit, and he probably wants to pull mine sometimes, and I think it works good that we're different personalities, and the tech savviness that he has, we are able to look at reverse engineering for components. We are looking at the scanning methods that, I like the way that I was kind of introduced as a past, present, and future kind of guy, because that's kind of how I feel. I mean, it's a matter of taking some of the things that we've learned from the past, being able to utilize them in the present, but then be able to see the future enough to say, hey, this is a new type of scanner, or hey, to capture this digital image, it's going to be better if we utilize this technology or this software to be able to modify, or having the ability to do something not necessarily faster, but being able to not be bogged down as much in the digital design realm. Because I think one of the most important things to us as clinical people is still patient care. I want to spend time with my patient. I want to make sure that the patient's fit appropriately. And so I don't ever want to lose that part of it. So in that, 3D forward thinking vision, I don't want to lose time with my patient either.
So that's pretty interesting, Paul. And I taken that, the idea of spending more time with patients. I'd like you to just kind of share a little bit from the business perspective of, okay, this is a journey that you're taking in 3D printing, but then can you kind of expound on that? What does that mean for Eastpoint as a business, and for like the people that bringing into Eastpoint, residents and new employees and such?
Yeah, I think you got residents. We go out and we visit schools, and immediately you say 3D printing, boom, everybody's ears perk up, and they're all kind of tuning into what you have to say. I think as long as we are able to show in the O&P field the ability to show progression, then we can entice young people to come to work with us. One of the things that I'd like to say that we are leaders in the industry in O&P here at Eastpoint. But I would also like to say that we are open to being able to utilize new technologies and respect. I think that's another thing too that we show these young people when they come out of school. They've worked hard. They've learned a lot. They come from varied backgrounds, and just bringing their level of expertise and enhancing that makes it beneficial for all as well. Because I mean, I never cease to be amazed at some of the young people coming out of school now that are showing us stuff, and showing us new ways to do things. And so I think, you don't get stuck in that past and just live there forever. I think that's a big part of it. And, certainly being able to reach, the missions work that we do. I mean, I think about that when I think about how far does it reach with Eastpoint. This 3D printing and where we're going. I mean, we're literally on the other side of the world taking a structure scanner on an iPad, a digital scan of someone, sending it to the U.S., fabricating a prosthesis that we take with us to the Ivory Coast, West Africa. How much more technologically advanced could you possibly get that people in developing nations are getting things that are higher tech than a lot of folks are getting? And I think that's probably my biggest frustration is that, you want to shake O&P people, and say, get on board here. Why are you not doing this? But again, I think a part of it is resistance, some of that old school. But I think as we turn out new young people, there's going to be a higher demand for the 3D printing.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting, but you say that people should do this, but I think there's a lot of resistance to change always. And, a lot of it, like, you must have failed a whole bunch of times too. The 3D scanners are really tricky and really annoying to work with, for example. I mean, how do you kind of balance the, experimentation and failing and, also like a budget and time and all that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, and again, that's one of the nice things about having residents. You can blame it on all them, right? So, but not really. I mean, the thing about having residents or young people that come in is you're expecting somewhat of some failures. We all fail. And I think that's the way that we learn how to do things better, obviously, right? And so failure is not a problem as long as you don't hurt a patient, carry it to the nth degree that there's, you're setting it up to be a catastrophic failure on someone. That's not ever our intention. So safety of our patients obviously is first. However, are there failures? Certainly there are. I mean, you have to remember, I came from 30 years ago doing things with a different type of Seattle shape maker was one of the first things that we used, back in school, and the old carving of the foam models and foam blanks and plaster models that we were literally carving in a carving machine. And so I've seen certainly technology change there, but as we see failures happen, if you don't push that envelope, you're not going to see, what we're capable of with certain types of materials. You need to know the properties of the material enough to understand where its failure point is. We don't want to over-engineer because, people lug around a prosthesis that's 20 pounds all day. They're extremely tired at the end of the day. If they carry around the same prosthesis and they're able to do that in 5 pounds, that's a total different, energy expenditure that they have during the day. And so, pushing the envelope is something that we always do, that we've never had a problem with. But again, in a very controlled environment with our patients, you can tell some of the extremely active patients, and we may over engineer and then start backing up from that. So.
Mhm. And what's the advantage for the patient of like, let's say, the 3D scanning and 3D printing? Why is it good for me if I would come in that this is the technologies that are deployed?
Yeah, I think the accuracy is one thing, because no matter how many times, if I put a roll of casting tape in your hands and a roll of casting tape in my hands, and both of us take a cast of a patient, we're going to get different results, because your hand strength may be different than mine different than yours. The tension values, how tight you pull or something like that, could deform or change the shape of the person's residual limb, or their leg or arm or whatever you're casting. And so I think the accuracy is one of the most important things. How we can, again, do things with 3D printing that we're not able to do with traditional fabrication. A good example of that is one area of a device being flexible and one area of a device being rigid. In traditional fabrication, that's very, very difficult. In digital fabrication, it's extremely easy. And I'm not saying that all digital design is easy. That's not it at all. I'm just saying we have that opportunity that you just cannot do nearly as well with traditional fabrication. So you're going to, as a patient, get to experience the benefit of that you would never be able to experience in traditional fabrication.
Yeah. But also, like, I think also one thing, this digitization thing has a real opportunity to really disrupt the value chain, to displace people. Like, for example, people could scan at home and somebody could send them their devices, for example, from maybe even another country, bypassing the orthotist, the clinician, whatever, entirely. This kind of stuff can also happen, right?
Sure, it can. And I think that's, it's kind of like you want to go to the doctor next door and you want to get a prescription written because you have some infection or something that you want to be treated by someone that's knowledgeable to be able to do the job for you. That's why you rely on your family care physician next door and you go over to see him. Well, if you like mail order and you like, and nothing against Amazon, I order from Amazon all the time, but if you jump out there and you order something online, you don't know what you're getting. One of those things that I have such a struggle with when I see these people in their basement printing artificial hands and stuff is, when it doesn't fit right or something breaks, who do they call? Where's the liability at? I mean, we as clinicians carry heavy duty liability for malpractice and things of that nature that, the guy in his basement's not going to carry. So do you want to go to a skilled person to do this who has gone to school to learn about anatomy and how a device is supposed to fit next to your residual limb or your body? Then you pay for that. And you go, well, wow, so don't we want to drive costs down? Well, certainly. I mean, I want prosthetics for all. I mean, I've seen that on some blog of somebody's, that prosthetics for all. And I agree with that, and I want prostheses to be made available for everybody in the world. That amputees aren't denied the opportunity to have a prosthesis. However, I want trained professionals to be doing that. You don't need to develop further problems. I mean, I'll give you a small example of that. Diabetics or people that are vascular compromised are fit with an artificial limb. If they are fit improperly and they are a below the knee or transtibial amputee, you cause a sore to come on their leg because you're an untrained professional, they could become an above knee amputee. Well, if you're not trained on how to do that properly, you shouldn't be in the field fitting people with artificial limbs.
So on that, Paul, just curious though, why do you think, especially in the upper extremity realm, why these organizations have kind of come to be, these free or like people printing in a basement. It seems like the prosthetic and orthotic industry, has almost like missed the boat, and people are looking outside of the industry for something that they feel the industry can't give. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's a licensure thing. I mean, I think that's probably where O&P has missed the boat. We didn't jump on the licensure board long ago like we should have, and it's kind of like a free for all. I mean, here in our state years ago, I was on the Medicaid review board, and all you had to be was licensed to be able to dispense orthotic devices. And I said, so what does that mean? They said, you just need to be licensed in the state. I said, a licensed orthotist, right? They said, no, just licensed. I said, so you're telling me that a licensed cosmetologist, a licensed contractor, building contractor can dispense these items? Yes, they're licensed. I said, something is wrong with this picture. And so I think that's where O&P has not spent the time to, I don't want to say weed people out, because I mean, I believe in free enterprise, but I also believe that there is, again, we should have a level of expertise that our licensure says if this is not dispensed by a licensed practitioner, a certified type practitioner, then you can't receive this device. I mean, for the longest time, we were the prescription fillers, right? I mean, I'm kind of like a pharmacist. I fill a prescription. Obviously, I should know more about prosthetics and orthotics than other folks because it's what we do every day. But, as a prescription, a doctor writes us a prescription, we fill a prescription. That shouldn't be able to be done by anybody else except someone licensed or certified to be able to fill that prescription. They shouldn't dispense something without a prescription. I mean, that's kind of like drugs. I mean, you can get them on the street, but is that where you want to go get your drugs for your health? I mean, so I think that's where O&P has missed the boat.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because there is this revolution going on. Everybody's swept up on it and stuff, and yeah, it's really difficult to find out where it's going to end up. I mean, I think now we're seeing a lot of sockets and we're seeing some 3D scanning. I mean, is this the future for your industry? Do you think everyone's going to be using this tool, or you kind of clearly think everyone should at least look into it? But do you really think that it's going to be prevalent across like a lot of different devices and a lot of different patients, and it's going to work at scale? How do you see this working?
Yeah, I absolutely see, if I had a crystal ball and I was looking at it 20 years from now, I would say every device will be 3D printed. Uh, are there still going to be some times that there are traditionally fabricated items? Absolutely. When I first got in the field, or when I first opened my office, 13, 14 years ago, I had a lady come to see me and she had an old wood socket. I never would have thought that we would have seen a wood socket still in existence. A wooden socket, a tree limb. I mean, what are you wearing here? And she said it was the most comfortable prosthesis she had ever worn, and she was not interested in changing. And so I think that there is still going to be some lingering, if you will, but I see. I'll make a bold prediction. In 20 years, 95% of all devices will be 3D printed.
Okay, and why is that? Because I mean, a lot of these parts of these devices need to be very tough and very straight, and I'm like, yeah, that's not going to be, the socket part. Maybe I get, but like the a lot of it doesn't seem like it's a good business case for 3D printing.
Well, I mean, you got to think about it too. Each socket, you have the socket that interfaces with the patient, right? And then you have a knee joint or a foot joint or ankle joint of something, that's going to attach to that. Components we buy out of catalogs, if you will. When you're thinking about the socket itself, everybody's different. So having a one-off customized device is something we do every single day. Are there small, medium, and large wrist splints? Because you have carpal tunnel syndrome, for an example, and you come into my office and we give you a small, medium, large, left or right. Certainly, there are some of those things. And off the shelf items, if you will, or pick it up at the pharmacy, that kind of thing. There's lots of those devices. But when you get down to a custom prosthesis or orthosis, you are talking about a one-off, because no human beings are the same. Brent and I have done medical mission work around the world, and we have made some things fit, that didn't look like they were made for the patient sometimes, that they may come in with, and it's an ill-fitting device, or, my grandfather passed away and gave me this leg. I thought I could use it. Wow. It's nowhere near custom made for you. So I think that's where the 3D enhancement comes in, because these devices are one-offs, if you will, and custom made.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the missionary work a few times. I mean, so what do you guys actually do? What do you do actually? Because I know what Brent does. I don't know if you do the same thing all the time, but what kind of work do you do then?
Yeah,
Overseas?
so Brent has taken me to Guatemala, almost killed me because he worked me to death down there. So I was scared to death of Brent when I went.
True story.
Anyway, true story. El Salvador is actually where I did my first missions work at. But a few years back, we took 2 shipping containers. Actually partnered with an NGO group in West Africa, in the Ivory Coast. Took 2 shipping containers and actually sent them over to West Africa, set up a first of its kind prosthetics laboratory there. So one of the shipping containers is like where we see the patients. And actually in the back of that shipping container, we've actually got bunk beds and a microwave, which is very important, in West Africa, and a small refrigerator, like a little apartment that we actually stay in when we're there. Then the other shipping container, they're separated, has kind of like a porch in between the 2 of them, a portico, and we actually do fabrication in the other one and modifications to their prostheses. So that's part of the vision I had, to be able to send a prosthetics lab to the Ivory Coast, and we go over there twice a year to Tanda, Ivory Coast, West Africa, and make a difference in lives.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sure that's very gratifying. And everything. And do you manage to train local people as well? Because that would be is that possible or not yet?
Yeah, we actually left an iPad and structure scanner there. So we taught them the casting techniques that we utilize to kind of capture the shape of the person's residual limb. And then we actually scan the inside of that cast, because one of the things about scanning and structure scanners is they kind of read a surface. And so if you can imagine, if I'm trying to manipulate a cast by hand as I'm taking an impression of your body part, if I'm doing that and I'm using my hands, doing that artistry stuff, if you will, and I'm squeezing on an area and relieving an area with my hands, you can't see that in a structure scanner. But what we do is we do a hybridized approach, so that we cast the patient, pull the cast off, and then scan the inside, so that we've kind of manipulated or moved that tissue. A good probably example for the audience to kind of get a picture of is, if you can imagine your foot was deformed or shaped wrong, or was bent in a certain direction, and we straighten that out in the casting procedure. That's what we want to try to capture. If we just scan the person's deformed foot, their foot would be twisted and would not be shaped the way that we want it to do. So it's kind of like pre-modifications, if you will, in that. And so we're able to, we train locals to do that. What is it? The old teach a man to fish thing. And that's how we get them to buy into this process. And so, we use locals and all the time. I mean, we have one of the local guys work on one of our sewing machines there because he was a seamstress, so it's kind of cool. So,
Paul, Joris loves adjustable stuff, and he loves the BOA dial and things like that. Can you share a little bit about some of the socket innovation that Harrison has done, and then obviously along with Eastpoint and some of the things that we're working on? And we've met the guys from Click Medical, and so just share a little bit of that with Joris.
yeah. One of the things that the traditional fabrication or fabricated prostheses, orthoses, don't adjust. It's kind of like, you use a carpentry term, we shim it. In other words, if you come in today, we fit you with a prosthesis, 6 months from now, you lose some weight or you lose some volume in your residual limb or your body part, if you will. How would we fill that in? Typically, it would be like if you're wearing a pair of shoes that are 3 sizes too big, how would you do it? You'd put 6 pair of socks on, right? And tighten that shoe back up on your foot. Same thing with a prosthesis or an orthosis is we would have to shim it up or actually get them to put socks on. And so having the ability to adjust is where this BOA or the Click Medical folks have just revolutionized the industry. And you can do this in traditional fabrication or 3D printing. So you're speaking to all the audience there. The nice thing about it is when you get up first thing in the morning, you're a certain size on your residual limb. You're walking around during the day, your residual limb starts getting smaller because you're literally pushing fluid out of your residual limb. Click Medical or these adjustable BOAs allows you to turn a knob, crank it down a little bit, tighten it up. You don't have to put that 6 pair of socks on, to make it feel better during the day. You can literally adjust it during the day. That's something that we just have not typically had in traditional fab. Now, we've done it with straps and different things of that nature, but the way that they've designed this is pretty phenomenal. And then we're starting to see it in not only the prosthetic devices, but the orthotic devices as well. So, imagine you fracture your arm and you put a device over your arm, and then you tighten down on this BOA strap, and it kind of locks you in place so that you could have a removable cast. Wouldn't that be nice? Because remember, I had a cast when I was a kid, and all I ever wanted to do was scratch my arm, and I couldn't get to it, and stuff. And so, not that you would be taking it off and on while you had a fracture, but just having a little bit of adjustability to it is just so phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so apart from that, I love the adjustable stuff. I'm a really huge fan of this. We've been talking with Brent a couple of times about like some kind of air, kind of remember those pump
Yeah,
those pump shoes,
yeah, that's right.
something like
Certainly.
that. Like that would be, I think, really really great. Or changing textures and stuff like that. So that would also be really cool. But anyway, and so what are some other innovations that you really think that if you look back on your career so far, you're like, oh wow, that was actually like a big step forward?
Um,
What are other things?
Yeah, I mean, in traditional gel liners, so that somebody puts a gel liner next to their residual limb, that feels totally different than I talked about the lady with the wooden socket. Instead of putting your tissue next to a hard device, that you've got a silicone type gel. That was revolutionary in orthotics and prosthetics. You have to think about WW2. The majority of the feet that were out there were one specific type, and they were basically made with a soft, cushiony type heel. And the majority of the amputees from WW2 received that same type prosthetic foot. Carbon graphite obviously changed the industry. So seeing some different materials, Proteor, used it's called a rush foot, but they used the same material that a helicopter blade is made out of. So, just seeing different materials that would hold up to the stresses that, as people walk on, pound them, is pretty amazing to see. Rebound, energy storing. These were things that, just a few short years ago. And again, when I say short years, 60, 80 years ago, were just unheard of. Those things have really revolutionized, what we do. And that's aside from the 3D printing stuff. I think, again, the 3D printing gets us to be able to push into the envelope of some different materials that we may have never used. And so I think that that's kind of cool too, especially meshes and things of that nature that, again, can give some automatic relief, on these devices that we were not able to do, again, traditionally before.
Yeah. And why did you end up in this field anyway? How did you end up doing this?
Wow. So years ago, I worked at a hospital right here in town where I'm at. I was an orderly or patient pusher. I used to bring the patients from their room down to physical therapy. And so physical therapy, we had an amputee clinic once a month. And it was kind of cool to see these guys come in from different locations, and they would actually cast a patient. And then the next time they came in, the patient would walk with this, what looked like Cinderella's glass slipper. It was a clear looking socket. And wow, they were walking. I mean, this was like incredible, and seemed like it was right up my alley. And so that's kind of where my interest started in this field. And actually met my first boss in the field at that hospital, and he said, "Would you like to come to work with me?" And so he offered me a job, and kind of the rest is history. One of the most rewarding things in my career is that my first boss that hired me, I was able to hire him, and so that was kind of cool. So he actually works with us now, and that's a pretty neat thing, watching it come full circle, because obviously that's what he meant to me in the field, and getting me started in it. And it's been an extremely rewarding career over all these years.
Yeah. And Brent mentioned that like most of the outfits in this um in the field are either like a kind of mom and pop, kind of like one single location, or maybe like large chains, but mainly it's very fragmented. But you've got mobile sites, you've got kind of a chain of locations. So how'd you end up going from, like, you want to start for yourself to building this rather large organization?
Yeah. I think you have to have a vision. I mean, you kind of, when you start a business, those entrepreneurial spirits that most people have, not that they're all out to conquer the world, but I think we all kind of think that that's what we can do. And so, as an entrepreneur, first starting a business, you cast this extremely large net. Now, are you going to be able to do all that? Probably not. However, if you don't have a vision, the people perish, right? And so I still believe in that. And so I think years ago when I first started it, I didn't know exactly where I was going. I mean, I wanted to be I had come from a big national company that had a ton of offices, and there I was, the one guy in the big pond trying to, to compete against those guys. And to start with, I mean, I think you start small, but then you start seeing a vision. Hey, wow, this is really possible. There are a lot of people out here that aren't being taken care of properly. And so you just kind of try to start making a difference in your area. And then as it continued to grow, one of the things that, I mean, you would think that this would just stand out like a sore thumb, that we've got patients that have no legs. Probably transportation to get them from their home here is a little more difficult. So it's kind of like this guy named Brent Wright. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, he kind of hit me in the head with the hammer and said, "Hey, man, how about a mobile unit? How about let's try on a mobile unit?" And I'm like, "Have you lost your mind, man? I mean, everybody's mobile." But I think the one thing that we did differently with that is that we really did mobile. We didn't just out of the trunk of your car go out to a patient's house. We took a little Ford Transit van. That's not a plug for Ford, by the way, but we took a little Ford Transit van, re-outfitted it into the essential tools that we need to be able to take care of patients at their home or at therapy places or wherever we go to see a patient. The parking lot of the convenience store, wherever we see them. I mean, there's patients all over, and so having those basic tools put inside those vans, wow, it made a difference. And thank you so much for coming to see me. Well, why don't we hire somebody else to do that? And they're probably the cheapest offices that I've ever owned, because a lot of people in the O&P industry, when they want to expand, they think that you need to put, well, I've got to have 10 offices and I've got to have 20 offices, and they brag about their 20 offices. And I go, you know what? I've got 20 mobile units, and they are 20 offices just like your 20 offices. And so I think that, that's kind of what led me that direction. Certainly having offices, it's just like we're in central Ohio as well. And, all the way from North Carolina, and you go, what in the world did you jump that far? Well, it was just the right people in the right place at the right time, and expanding into Pennsylvania now. So I could certainly see us being even more regional than what we are. And, the future looks bright for us.
And to what do you credit that success? Is it like, are you really financially really prudent? Do you have the right ideas or the right people? What are some key elements or kind of ingredients for that success, you think?
Yeah, well, I think, if we go right back to the mobile and focus on that, the nice thing about the mobile is if I drive into this town and there's not enough business, then we drive over to this town. And, that saved me from going and opening an office in a town that was a total waste. And so I think with the mobile, it's a little more farther reaching. And that's been extremely successful for us. But you got to have a heart for that too, man, because you stick a van under somebody and say, oh, by the way, you're going to be driving all day. A lot of people don't like to do that. And, you gotta hire the right individuals with that. Now we've been through our share of individuals, that's a part of it too. And, you have to find the right disciplined employee that can come up with their own schedule, be willing to listen to people kind of driving their schedule. And, listen, I'm a talker, so I'll sit and talk with you for hours at your home. I would not be a good person to do that part of the business because, I might see 2 patients in a day and we need you to see 8 or 10 patients in a day, and so I think that's, you have to be disciplined to do that. And so, again, that's where our success has come is we've been able to try areas before we actually go spend a lot of money in that one specific region.
Mm-hmm. And do you think it's like, I mean, being strong operationally is I think a key element here, or is that like, does that drive your success?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. It's like, one thing that's a little different in the medical field, especially when you're billing, is, if I'm Eastpoint Prosthetics and down the street is ABC Prosthetics or whatever name, you choose, and we both accept Medicare, the reimbursement for both of us is the same. So the neat thing about that is we're not competing with pricing. I'm not saying, oh, well, I'll cut $5 off my price. You come down here to see me. So then it all of a sudden becomes service oriented. What kind of level service do you give? And that's one thing that we demand of our employees is that you're going to take care of people. I think too often in businesses, everybody sees the dollar signs and says, hey, I want to make $1 million. I want to make a lot of money. And I've found in this business that if you take care of people, the money comes. And so I feel like I kind of reversed the order of that. I didn't just go after money. I went after taking care of people. And because of that, we've been successful.
Okay. Well, that's a good sentiment. I think a good thing to know that that's what that success comes from. But and thank you so much for being here today, Paul.
Awesome, Joris. It's so nice to meet you. And thanks again for having me. Maybe we can get together again sometime soon.
Yeah,
That
definitely.
would be awesome.
And thank you as well for Brent.
Yeah, no, and I know we foreshadowed this at the very beginning of the podcast, and I'd love to leave our listeners with something. Paul, can you share a little bit about that TPU gauntlet for the young lady? Just share a little bit of the history and what she's been through, and just really how that technology made a difference for her.
Yeah, this young lady experienced it's called complex regional pain syndrome, CRPS. It used to be known as reflex sympathetic dystrophy, and actually what that kind of is if you can imagine, just blowing on your arm, for an example, the hairs on your arm would stand up, and that would cause pain. So literally, you could be in pain at basically nothing. And so this was going on in her lower extremity, on her, I think it's her right side. But anyway, so she had always worn what looked like a ski boot, and I had made several of them for her over time. And the ski boot, if you can imagine that, Joris, is like not only for protection, but to keep anything from bumping against her and causing an exacerbation of the condition. And when I say that, her leg would literally contract, her foot would start contorting, and all this stuff. So, she's been walking around on this big ski boot, and we put what looks kind of like grandma's rocking chair on the bottom of it, a big rocker sole, so that she can walk with that thing. And it's just a big clunky boot. And so Brent and I got together with this young lady, took a scan or cast of her. I can't remember. Brent, did we scan her? We wound up scanning her as well, but we did both. But anyway, the design was this TPU material, which was softer. And immediately when you start thinking about a patient like this, you completely immobilize them. In other words, lock them up so that no movement can happen, keeps pain from occurring. I mean, that's our goal. That's what we're taught in school. Make sure it's got a hard shell on the outside of it, and it's padded real nice on the inside, so it's not hurting her. But if somebody bumps into her at the supermarket with a shopping cart, she doesn't freak out and writhe in pain laying in aisle 6, or whatever. So we put this soft boot on her, and all I can say is it blew my mind. TPU is your listeners may know some of this, but in the O&P industry, it's a flexible type material, kind of like soft inner liners that we use on prosthetic limbs, for an example. Similar to like a Proflex type material, if you will. And so we put this soft boot on her, by the way, with a BOA system that kind of locked her in. If you can imagine like a tall combat boot that's strapped up real tight to kind of immobilize her, that's what we were kind of going for. But it was soft and had her toes exposed, and gave just a little bit, give a little bit of flexibility. So we put this on this young lady. She was able to put this thing in her regular shoe. She started walking and crying. And I'm thinking, oh God, we killed this lady. I mean, she's hurting bad. Oh no, we did the wrong thing and all this kind of stuff. And she said, I have never felt anything that gave me more support, changing my life forever, that I may not have to wear that big clunky, ugly boot again. And I said, wow. I said, but it's kind of flexible a little bit. She said, when you tighten it up, it becomes rigid. And so it just kind of baffled us a little bit, because here we are locking people up, which is what we're supposed to do, but not using flexible material. How do you use flexible material to lock somebody up? You know, when you go to the doctor and he puts a cast on your leg, it hardens, right? And becomes real rigid. Well, that's what we were taught. And that's what we've always been taught in school. And so to produce something for her that was rigid enough, but flexible enough that, you know, would breathe and would allow, you know, her skin to feel the toleration of this device. It moved with her, didn't cause sores, was a lot easier to walk in. It's just a game changing device for her in her life.
Wow, that's wonderful. Wonderful story. And that was made on with MJF or
It is a, yeah,
Correct.
that's right.
Lubrizol TPU,
Yeah.
done by Avid, and it's combination. Well, Avid is Lubrizol now, right? So, but they did it for us, and you know, that was a Rev 1, and that was neat. So yeah, I appreciate you sharing that with us. And yeah, we're up against the clock, but I appreciate your time, Paul, for sure. Joris, take it away.
yeah. Well, thanks everyone for being here today. Thank you for being here today, Paul. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
And Brent, thank you for being here as well.
Oh, this has been great. A lot to learn, and super excited about what's coming next.
Perfect, dude. Perfect. And me too. And yeah, so thank you for listening to the Prosthetics and Orthotics podcast. My name is Joris Peels, and join us for our next episode. Bye bye.